Welcome to my channel, The Hidden Science of Breathing, an audiobook by William Walker Atkinson.
Chapter 1. Prologue. The ideas that the West has formed about yogis, their philosophy and practices, are often mistaken. To this have contributed the picturesque narratives about fakirs and beggars, who supposedly swarm the roads and cities of India, calling themselves yogis. But the typical yogi is not a dirty fanatic or an ignorant Hindu, who sits in a fixed posture until the ossification of his body, or who raises his arms, and then remains in this position all his life. Or who clenches his fist and keeps it closed, until the nails pierce the palm of the hand. There are such people, perhaps. But their claim to the title of yogi seems as ridiculous to the true yogi, as the claim to the title of Doctor of Surgery, by a seller of placebos seems, to the rector of Harvard University. We can affirm that there is a perfectly defined yogic science, which was formed by the experience that was transmitted for centuries, from masters to disciples. Since ancient times, in India and other Eastern countries, there were men who devoted their time and attention to the physical, mental and spiritual development of man. To these investigations and teachings, the Sanskrit term yug, which means to unite, was finally applied. From this same root comes the Spanish word yugo, of homologous meaning. Although the relationships with the etymology are several, it is noteworthy that the yogi is subject in its effort to govern the body and mind. And that effort directed and disciplined is known as yoga, which has physical and spiritual elements interrelated. The science of breathing has many points of contact with yoga, and although it is primarily concerned with developing the physical body, it also involves the field of spiritual development. The Hindu yogis always dedicated care to this, because breathing was fundamental to the attainment of their goals. Although several Western writers have mentioned some elements of the yogic teachings, we believe that it was reserved to the author of this work to give to the West, in a simple and clear way, the fundamental principles of the science of breathing, and some of the exercises and methods preferred by the great yogic masters. In this work, we will try to refer to the Western worldview, which in many ways complements the Eastern vision. And the concepts will be addressed in everyday language, avoiding Sanskrit terms, which confuse most Western readers. In the first part of this work, we will focus on the physical aspect of the science of breathing. And then, on the psychic, mental and spiritual aspects. We would be forgiven for feeling proud to have summarized so much yogic teaching in so few pages, without the need to use incomprehensible words and expressions. Although we fear that some may consider the work too simple, and may not give it the attention it deserves, we know that, contrary to what is often thought, the fundamentals of Eastern thought are easy to understand, profound and at the same time very practical. Chapter 2. To breathe is to live. Life depends on the act of breathing. To breathe is to live, and to live is to breathe. To breathe is to live, and there is no life without breathing. Everything that lives owes its existence to the capacity to breathe. All animals, and all plants. A child at birth and a few seconds later, breathes in for the first time the air, thus begins his life on earth. An old man exhales weakly for the last time, he stops breathing and ends his life. From the first inhalation in the most tender childhood, until the last sigh of old age, a long succession of continuous respirations takes place. Breathing is the most important function of the body, because all the others undoubtedly depend on it. Man can live long periods without eating, and even some days without drinking, but without breathing he lives only a few minutes. But not only survival is tied to the act of breathing, because the way you breathe will depend on the vitality of the individual and its resistance against disease. An intelligent mastery of the faculty of breathing results in an invaluable benefit to physical, psychological and spiritual health. While careless breathing shortens our days, threatens our vitality, intelligence and well-being, and places us in favorable conditions to fall prey to many ailments and diseases. Man, in his natural state, in the same way as the animal and the child, breathes naturally and properly, but in many cases, has received a negative influence of civilization. Because the changes to which civilized life has subjected us, in terms of walking, standing and sitting, have stripped us in many cases, of the atavistic faculty, to know how to breathe correctly and naturally. The percentage of civilized men who breathe correctly, is very small, and the result can be seen, in the sunken chests and in the exponential increase, of respiratory system diseases. All Eastern and Western experts agree, that the relationship between natural breathing and health, is evident, direct and explainable. Western science demonstrates that physical health, depends to a great extent on correct breathing. And the instructors of the East, not only admit that their Western brothers are right, but they also maintain that, in addition to the physical benefit derived from normal breathing, it is possible to increase, by knowing and practicing the science of breathing, man's mental energy, as well as his happiness, self-control, clarity of vision, morality, and spiritual perfection. Many schools of Eastern philosophy have been founded on the science of breathing. And the West will be able to obtain enormous benefits when it begins to adopt the millenarian wisdom of the East, as far as breathing is concerned. The theory of the East, united with the practice of the West, will bear abundant fruit. This work will deal with the science of breathing, which includes everything known to the Western physiologist, and in addition, the psychic-spiritual aspect of the subject. It not only leads to physical health, in accordance with the so-called deep breathing by Western scientists, but also penetrates into the lesser-known aspects of the matter, showing how the Eastern sages govern their body, and also how they increase their mental capacity, and develop the spiritual aspect of their nature, thanks to the careful practice of the science of breathing. The yogi practices exercises, by which he obtains mastery of his body, and learns to send to any organ or part of the body, a greater current of vital energy or prana, thus strengthening the organ or part he desires. He knows all about the physiological effects of correct breathing, just like a Western physiologist. But he also knows that there is more to the air than oxygen and nitrogen, and that the simple oxygenation of the blood is not the only transformation that occurs when breathing. He knows the effects of energy on the body and mind of man, and knows that he can know and use many of these effects. He knows that rhythmic breathing places him in harmonic vibration with nature, and favors the development of his latent faculties. And he knows that by controlling his breathing, he can heal himself and others, as well as banish fear, worries and sinister passions, to improve his personal configuration. This teaching is the subject of this book. We want to give in a few chapters, the basic explanations of a millenary and inexhaustible wisdom. We want to indicate the beginning of a path that leads to unsuspected places, and that lasts as long as our life. We want to instill in the minds of the Western world, the notion of the value of the science of breathing. Chapter 3. Exoteric Theory of Breathing. This chapter will describe the theories of the Western scientific world, about the functions of the respiratory organs, and the role that breathing plays in human physiology. Then, in the following chapters, we will present the additional theories, and research-proven facts, of the Eastern School. The Eastern School accepts the results of Western science, and adds much knowledge, which Westerners do not accept for the time being, but which in due time, they will discover and present to the world, as an essential truth. We will now give a brief description, of the organs of respiration. The organs of respiration, are the lungs and the air passages leading to them. The lungs are two, and occupy the pleural chamber of the thorax, one on each side of the midline. They are separated from each other by the heart, the major blood vessels, and the air-conducting tubes. Each lung is free in all directions, except at the root, formed mainly by the bronchi, arteries and veins, which connect the lungs with the trachea and the heart. The lungs are made up of a very elastic tissue, which gives them a spongy texture. They are covered by a thin and resistant envelope, called pleura, one of whose walls adheres closely to the lung, and the other to the inner side of the chest. Its function is to secrete a fluid, which allows the inner sides to slide smoothly over each other, in the act of breathing. The air passages are, the inside of the nose, pharynx, larynx, trachea, and bronchi. When we breathe, the air enters through the nose, where it is heated by contact with the mucous membrane, and after passing through the pharynx and larynx, enters the trachea. The trachea then divides into numerous tubes, called bronchi, which in turn, are subdivided and end, in new and tiny subdivisions, of small air spaces. Each lung has millions of these tiny air cells. It has been calculated that if the air cells of the lungs were to extend contiguously, they would cover an area of more than 1,000 square meters. Air enters the lungs due to the action of the diaphragm, a muscle that extends across the trunk and separates the thoracic cavity from the abdominal cavity. The diaphragm works, in a sense, as automatically as the heart, but can become a semi-voluntary muscle, by the effort of will. When it dilates, it increases the capacity of the chest and lungs, causing it to lower consequently, the internal atmospheric pressure of the lungs. And the air from the outside, then rushes into the vacuum thus formed, filling the lungs. When dilation ceases, the chest and lungs contract, the internal atmospheric pressure of the lungs increases, and air escapes. This mechanism of entry and exit of air is carried out to oxygenate the organism, in which the blood plays a fundamental role. The blood is impelled by the pumping of the heart, along the arteries to the capillaries, which distribute it to all parts of the body. Then, through the veins, it returns to the heart, which sends it to the lungs to be oxygenated, and then passes into the arterial system. Arterial blood is bright red, and has vital qualities and properties. The blood of the veins is bluer in color and less bright, because it returns loaded with waste from the body. It leaves as a fresh stream from the mountains, and returns as a turbid drain, going to the right atrium of the heart. From the atrium, the blood stream passes through an opening to the right ventricle of the heart, which in turn sends it to the lungs. There, capillaries distribute it through the air cells, where the impure blood stream is distributed into the millions of delicate air cells of the lungs. When breathing in, the oxygen in the air is brought into contact with the impure blood through the capillaries. These are so constituted that their walls are thick enough so that the blood cannot pass through them, and thin enough to allow the oxygen to penetrate. When it comes into contact with the blood, it supplies it with oxygen, and releases the carbon dioxide, generated by the waste and poisonous matter, which it has collected from all parts of the body. Then, the purified and oxygenated blood, returns again to the heart, red, dark and bright, loaded with vital properties and qualities. When it reaches the left atrium, it passes into the left ventricle, from where it leaves again to circulate through the arteries, and distribute oxygen to all parts of the body. Every 24 hours, pass through the capillaries of the lungs, about 17,000 liters of blood, whose corpuscles go in single file, and expose their sides to oxygen from the air. Arterial blood well exposed to the air, contains about 25% free oxygen. Truly, one is overcome with awe and admiration, before the infinite wonder of nature. It is clear then, that if not enough pure air reaches the lungs, the impure current of venous blood cannot be purified, and the body remains impure and devitalized. It is also clear, that without breathing in the necessary amount of air, the blood cannot continue its work, and the body, malnourished, falls ill, or remains in a state of very fragile health. Even if it is not the cause of a particular disease, poor breathing can be seen in a poor complexion. While the correct breathing, and therefore the normal circulation, determine a robust complexion, bright and full of vitality. If the blood is not completely purified by the regenerative process of the lungs, it returns to the arteries without having been purified, that is, without having eliminated the impurities it took on its return journey. If these impurities return to the system, they will manifest themselves in some form of blood disease or other disease resulting from the abnormal functioning of an insufficiently nourished organ. When the blood is properly exposed to the air in the lungs, its impurities are eliminated, and the blood takes in oxygen, which it then carries to all parts of the body. The blood, as we have seen, through the capillaries reaches every cell, tissue, muscle, and organ. And it invigorates and strengthens them, replacing worn-out cells and tissues, by new materials, which nature transforms for use. It should also be remembered that the whole body receives nutrition from the assimilated food. Therefore, if the assimilation is imperfect, the nutrition will always be incomplete, and the organism will be weakened. And because the digestive function depends materially on a certain oxygenation of the food, which is only possible when oxygen comes in contact with the food, then it is not strange that weak lungs are so often on a par with poor digestion. Every particle of food or drink must be oxygenated, so that it can yield its nutritional characteristics, and so that the waste products of the organism have the necessary conditions for their elimination from the system. An insufficient amount of oxygen means imperfect nutrition, elimination, and health. Those who breathe well are much less likely to catch a cold than those who breathe inadequately. And generally, they have an abundance of well-oxygenated blood, which enables them to resist temperature changes. In addition to the important processes already mentioned, the act of breathing exercises the internal organs and muscles. Western authors on the subject do not usually dwell on this fact, although they know it, while Easterners duly appreciate it. In an incomplete respiration, not all the cells of the lungs come into operation, and thus part of the lung capacity is lost, suffering the system in proportion to the lack of oxygenation. Animals, in their native state, breathe naturally, and it is undoubtedly that man has also done so in the same way. But the way of life adopted by the civilized man moves him away from the natural breathing. Therefore, we must rediscover the way of breathing, according to the design of nature. Chapter 4. Esoteric Theory of Respiration. The science of respiration has two aspects, one esoteric or internal, and the other exoteric or external. Its physiological aspect, which we have briefly described, may be considered as the external or exoteric part of the subject, and the aspect which we are going to consider here, as the esoteric or internal. Always, in all latitudes, but most especially in Oriental countries, some masters teach a small number of disciples, usually in secret, that there exists in the air a substance or principle, and from which they derive all activity, vitality, and life. They differ the names given to this substance, and in other respects, which derive from the assumption of its existence. But the fundamental principle is the same in all occult teachings and philosophies, and for centuries was also part of the teachings of the Eastern yogis. In this work, we will designate this principle by the term prana, a Sanskrit word meaning energy, absolute, and also absolute energy. Many authorities among occultists teach that prana, which the yogis call prana, is the universal principle of energy or force, and that all energy or force is derived from prana. Or rather, that it is a particular mode of its manifestation. In this book, we shall confine ourselves to considering prana as the principle of energy, manifested in all living forms, which distinguishes them from inanimate forms. We can consider it as the active principle of life. It is found in all forms, from amoeba to man, and from the most rudimentary plant life, to the highest of animal life. Prana pervades everything, and is in everything. For it is present in all animate forms, and as occult philosophy teaches that life is in everything, in every atom, we may infer from its teachings, that prana is everywhere and in all things. And that the apparent lack of life in any of them, is only a minor degree of manifestation of the symptomatology of the living. It should not be confused with the ego, particle of the divine spirit, which constitutes the pit of individuation, around which matter and energy are agglomerated, forming an individual, a particular manifestation of the living. When the principle of individuation leaves a body, the resulting atoms, even when disintegrated, carry with them enough prana to maintain their vitality and to be able to form new combinations of matter. The unused prana returns to its place of origin. Prana is then the name by which we designate a universal principle, the essence of all movement, force or energy. In a certain way, it produces the form of activity that accompanies life. This great principle exists in all forms of matter, but should not be confused with matter. It is in the air, but it is not the air, nor is it the chemical bodies, which mixed in the atmosphere constitute it. Animals and plants breathe it with the air. It is inhaled by the organism together with oxygen, but it is not oxygen. The Hebrew writer Moses, author of Genesis, knew the difference between the atmospheric air and the mysterious and powerful principle contained in it. He speaks of Neshemet Ruach Chayim, which translated means, the breath of the spirit of life. In Hebrew Neshemet means, the ordinary breath, air, and Chayim, life. The word Ruach means, spirit, and according to the occultists, it is the same principle, which in this book we call prana. Prana is in the atmospheric air, but also where the air cannot reach. We are constantly inhaling the air, and with it, the prana of the air, which we appropriate for our use. Being found in the air, and in regular quantity when it is pure, we draw it from that source more readily, than from any other. In ordinary breathing, we absorb and extract a normal amount of prana. But with the techniques of regulated breathing, generally called yogic breathing, we are able to extract a greater quantity, which we can use very conveniently. We can store it. Many powers attributed to advanced occultists come largely from the knowledge of this fact, and the intelligent use of the extraordinary force that comes from this accumulation. Yogis know that they can establish relations with the storehouse of prana, and dispose of it for whatever they need. The strengthening that comes from these uses of the breath are not only physical. But the brain can also receive an increase of energy from the same source, improve its performance, and even acquire psychic powers. Whoever possesses the faculty of storing prana, consciously or unconsciously, often radiates vitality and strength, which is clearly perceived by those around him. Such an individual can communicate his strength to others, and increase their vitality and health. The so-called magnetic healing occurs in this way, although many magnetizers do not know the origin of their power. Western scientists, seeing that the existence of prana could not be detected by scientific instruments, generally disdained the Eastern theory. Unable to explain the principle, they denied it. They recognized, however, that the air of certain places possesses beneficial properties, and physicians send the sick to such places, in the hope that they will regain their health. The blood assimilates oxygen from the air, and the circulatory system uses it. The nervous system assimilates the prana from the air, and uses it for itself. Just as the oxygenated blood circulates throughout the whole organism, and takes care of its construction and repair, so the prana circulates throughout all parts of the nervous system, intensifying its vitality. And in the same way, as the oxygen in the blood is consumed according to the needs of the organism, the supply of prana is consumed by our thoughts, desires, actions, emotions, etc. And its constant replenishment is consequently needed, in the physiological organism. Every thought, act, will, effort, and movement of a muscle consumes a certain amount of force, which is actually a modality of prana. To move a muscle, the brain sends an impulse to the nerves, and the muscle moves, causing a consumption of prana proportionate to the effort made. If we bear in mind that the greatest quantity of prana acquired by man comes to him through the inhaled air, it is easy to appreciate the enormous importance of good breathing. Chapter 5. The Nervous System. Let us note first of all that the Western scientific theories of respiration are limited to the process of inhalation and exhalation and its use in the circulatory system. Whereas the yogic theory also considers the absorption of prana, and its manifestation through the channels of the nervous system. We will now dwell on it. The nervous system of man is divided into two major subsystems, the cerebrospinal system, and the so-called sympathetic system. The cerebrospinal consists of that part of the nervous system, contained in the skull and spinal column, i.e., the brain with its cerebellum and spinal cord, as well as the nerves that branch from both. This system presides over the functions of animal life called volitional, sensory, and so on. The sympathetic system includes that part of the nervous system, located mainly in the thoracic, abdominal and pelvic cavities, which is distributed by the internal organs. And it governs involuntary processes, such as growth or nutrition. The cerebrospinal system is responsible for the senses, sight, hearing, taste, smell and touch, and is a relational instrument with the outside world. This system can be compared to a telegraphic installation, where the brain is the central office, and the spinal cord and the nerves are the cables and wires, which are in intimate connection with it. The encephalon is a mass of nervous tissue consisting of three parts, the cerebrum, which occupies the anterior, middle and posterior part of the skull. The cerebellum, which occupies the lower and posterior part of the skull, and the medulla oblongata, which is the widened beginning of the spinal cord, and is located in the nape of the neck, in front of the cerebellum. The cerebrum is the organ that manifests itself in intellectual activity. The cerebellum directs the movements of the voluntary muscles. The medulla oblongata is the upper end of the spinal cord. And from this and the brain, cranial nerves that extend to various parts of the head, to the sense organs, to the respiratory system, and some organs of the thorax and abdomen. The spinal cord occupies the internal canal of the spinal column, and is a long mass of nerve substance, which branches into nerves, which are directed to all parts of the body. The spinal cord is like a long telegraphic cable, and the nerves, the wires related to the main cable. The sympathetic nervous system consists of a double chain of ganglia parallel to the spinal column, and other ganglia located in the head. Both contain nerve cells, and are in relation to each other by means of nerve filaments, and with the cerebrospinal system, by motor and sensory nerves. From these ganglia leave numerous fibers, which are directed to the organs of the body, blood vessels, etc. At different points, the nerves meet each other, and form what is known by the name of plexus. The sympathetic system governs involuntary processes, such as circulation, respiration or digestion. Western science calls nerve force, the force that the brain transmits to all parts of the body, through the nerves. The Orientals believe that it is a manifestation of prana, with characteristics similar to those of electrical energy. Without this nervous force the heart could not beat, nor the blood circulate, nor the lungs breathe, nor the various organs function. In short, without it the machine of the body would be paralyzed. And even more, the brain cannot think without prana. In addition, the yogic teachings go beyond Western science, in an important particularity of the nervous system, the solar plexus. The solar plexus is located in the epigastric region, behind the pit of the stomach, on either side of the spine. It is composed of white and gray brain matter, similar to that of the human brain. For Western science, it is simply one of many agglomerations of sympathetic nerves and ganglia, which are located in different parts of the body. Yogic science, on the other hand, teaches that the solar plexus is actually a very important part of the nervous system. It constitutes a kind of brain, which plays one of the fundamental functions in the human economy. However, Western science seems to be slowly approaching the recognition of this truth, known to Eastern yogis for many centuries. Some modern Western authors are beginning to recognize that the solar plexus plays a more important role than it is recognized, and have named it the abdominal brain, to emphasize its importance. For yogic science, the solar plexus is the great central reservoir of prana. It is known that a strong blow to the solar plexus can sometimes cause instant death. And professional wrestlers take advantage of this vulnerability to momentarily paralyze their opponents by hitting them there. The epithet solar is well applied to this brain, because from it radiates force and energy to all parts of the body, and even the brain depends on it, given its quality of prana deposit. Sooner or later, Western science will recognize the true function of the solar plexus, and will set about studying it, and discovering the wonders it contains. Chapter 6. Nasal breathing versus mouth breathing. The first lesson of the yogic science of respiration consists in teaching to breathe through the nose, and to extirpate the habit of breathing through the mouth. The respiratory apparatus of man is so constituted that air can be inhaled either through the mouth or through the nasal passages. But it is extremely important the method that is followed, because it will depend largely, health and strength, or disease and weakness. The normal method of breathing is to inhale air through the nostrils, but it is surprising how little this simple truth is known among civilized peoples. People of all walks of life habitually breathe through the mouth, and consent that their children should follow that example. Many of the diseases, to which civilized man is exposed, come from the habit of breathing through the mouth. Children who breathe in this way, grow up with altered vitality, and are marked by that unhealthy habit, for the rest of their days. Among the savages, mothers proceed much more naturally in this respect, because they are obviously guided by instinct. By intuition, they recognize that the nostrils are the ways on purpose to lead the air to the lungs. Therefore, they accustom their children to close their lips and breathe through the nose, tilting their heads forward when they sleep. Many contagious diseases are contracted due to the habit of breathing through the mouth, and numerous cases, colds and minor ailments in the respiratory tract, recognize the same origin. There are people who, in order to disguise it, keep their mouth closed during the day, but breathe through their mouth during the night, and in this way, continue to oxygenate their organism incorrectly. Careful scientific experiments have shown that those who breathe through the mouth while sleeping are more likely to contract contagious diseases than those who breathe through the nose. The importance of breathing through the nose lies in the fact that the only protective apparatus of the respiratory organs are the nostrils. When breathing through the mouth, there is nothing to filter the air on the way to the lungs, stopping the dust, or any other foreign matter. It is important to remember, the mouth offers no protection to the respiratory organs, and cold air, dust, impurities and germs, penetrate unhindered by this route. In addition, this improper breathing allows cold air to enter the lungs, which are consequently damaged. Inflammation of the respiratory organs often comes from inhaling cold air through the mouth. And the man who breathes in this way during the night always wakes up with a sensation of dryness in the palate and throat. On the other hand, the conformation of the nostrils and nasal passages show the careful foresight of nature in this respect. The nostrils are two narrow channels, containing numerous hairs, intended to serve as a sieve and stop the impurities in the air, which will then be expelled in exhalations. In addition, the nostrils not only have this purpose, but also have the important mission of heating the air. The long and sinuous nostrils are lined with a warm mucous membrane, which warms the inhaled air, so that the cold air cannot harm the throat or the lungs. No animal, except man, sleeps with his mouth open or breathes through it, and even the least civilized peoples usually breathe correctly. In the nostrils the air is filtered, purified and refined, before it reaches the delicate organs of the throat and the lungs, so that they are not harmed by its impurities. The impurities, stopped by the mucous membranes of the nostrils, are then thrown out with the exhalation. And in case they accumulate too quickly, or manage to penetrate into forbidden regions, nature arouses us sneezing, which violently expel foreign matter. When air enters the lungs through the nasal passages, it is as different from the outside air, as purified water differs from the water in the cistern. The action of the nostrils in respiration is as important as the action of the mouth in the digestive system, which stops the pits and bones, so that they do not pass into the stomach. And just as no one would try to eat through the nose, you should not think of breathing through the mouth. Another consequence of mouth breathing is that the nasal passages, due to their relative inaction, are not kept clean and are not continuously renewed, so they are exposed to contract local diseases. Just as abandoned roads quickly become overgrown with weeds, so do non-functioning nasal passages fill with impurities and noxious matter. It is not likely that those who usually breathe through the nose suffer the discomfort caused by the accumulation of mucus and other substances in the nostrils. Even in the East, special techniques have been developed to keep the nasal passages clean and free of impurities. A favorite method in the East is to immerse the face in a pot of water, absorb through the nose a little water, pass it down the throat and spit it out through the mouth. Of course, this method requires considerable practice. Another effective practice is to stand in front of an open window and breathe freely, closing one nostril with the index finger or thumb and suck the air through the one that is open. And repeating several times the same operation alternately, with one nostril and the other. This practice makes disappear, in most cases, obstructions of the nose. The question of nasal breathing is of great importance, not only because of the great importance it has in its relation to health, but also because it is prerequisite of the breathing exercises that we will then expose. It is also one of the fundamental principles of the science of yogic breathing. No one who wishes to be initiated into the mysteries of the science of breathing can neglect this aspect of nasal breathing. Chapter 7. For methods of breathing. We will begin with the mechanism of the movements of the breath. The mechanism of breathing manifests itself in two acts. 1. The elastic movements of the lungs. 2. The activities of the walls and bottom of the thoracic cavity, where the lungs are. The thorax is the portion of the trunk, comprised between the neck and the abdomen. It forms a cavity, occupied mainly by the heart and lungs. It is limited by the spine, the ribs, the sternum and the diaphragm. It is commonly called chest, and is a kind of completely closed box of conical shape, with the apex upwards. The posterior part is constituted by the vertebral column, the anterior part by the sternum, and the sides by the ribs. Man has 24 ribs, 12 on each side of the spine, from where they start. The 7 upper pairs are called true ribs, because they are attached directly to the sternum. The remaining 5 pairs are called floating ribs, because they are not attached as the previous ones. The 2 upper pairs of these false ribs are attached by cartilage to the other ribs, and the remaining ones have their anterior part free. Between the ribs, there are 2 superficial muscular layers, called intercostal muscles. The diaphragm, of which we have already spoken, separates the thoracic cavity from the abdominal cavity. In the act of inhalation or inspiration of air, the muscles dilate the lungs, and determine a vacuum in which the air rushes, as we have already explained, by pressure difference. The whole process of respiration depends on the referred muscles, the intercostal muscles and the diaphragm, which for convenience we can call respiratory muscles. Without the help of these muscles, the thoracic cage cannot be dilated, and the science of breathing depends in great part on their correct functioning and their regular action. For it is from them that the ease of obtaining the greatest degree of lung expansion, and absorbing the greatest amount of air, oxygen and prana, results. The yogis classify the breathing in high breathing, medium breathing, low breathing, and full breathing. We shall describe the first 3 methods, and dwell at greater length on the 4th, on which the science of breathing is mainly based. High breathing. This method of breathing is known in the West as clavicular breathing. Thus the ribs, clavicles and shoulders are raised, and at the same time the abdomen is contracted, the contents of which collide with the diaphragm, which in turn is lifted. In this method of breathing, the upper and lower chest and lungs are involved, and therefore penetrates into them very little air. With this method a very poor result is obtained, at the cost of maximum effort. High breathing is probably the worst method of breathing. It is the most common way of breathing in the West. Many diseases of the vocal organs are attributable to this inefficient method of breathing, and the effort required of such delicate organs results in multiple health disorders. Many people who do it also breathe through the mouth, which causes even more problems. For those who have some doubts about what we have said about this way of breathing, we advise you to perform the following experiment. Expel all the air contained in the lungs, and standing, with hands at your sides, raise your shoulders and collarbones, and inhale the air. You will notice that the amount of air you inhale is much less than normal. Then repeat the inhalation, but after having lowered the shoulders and clavicles, and you will then have received a highly effective breathing teaching. Middle breathing. This method of breathing is known in the West as intercostal breathing, and although less faulty than high breathing, it is still quite imperfect. In middle breathing the diaphragm rises, the abdomen contracts, the ribs rise a little, and the chest partially dilates. This type of breathing is very widespread. And well looked at, it is nothing more than the defective high breathing, a little improved. Low breathing. This method is much better than those mentioned above. In the West it is called abdominal breathing, deep breathing, diaphragmatic breathing, etc. Western scientists have already understood the benefits of this form of breathing, and have induced many people to use it, instead of the harmful methods already mentioned. Many have profited from the knowledge of the ancient truths of the East. For there have been courses, where the method of low breathing was taught, as if it were something new and invented by those who taught these courses. But in any case they have not wasted their money, those who abandoned the old methods, high and medium breathing. Although many Westerners believe that this method is the best of all, yogis know that it is only a part of the method that they have used for centuries, which they call full breathing. However, it is first necessary to know the principles of the low breathing, and then go into the full breath. But let's go to the diaphragm. What is it? We have said that it is a large muscle, which separates the thoracic cavity from the abdominal cavity. When it is still, it presents a concave surface towards the abdomen, that is to say, the diaphragm seen from the abdomen, it would look like the sky seen from the earth, the inside of a curved surface. Therefore, the side of the diaphragm facing the organs of the chest is similar to the arched surface of a hill. When the diaphragm is activated, the protrusion descends, and the diaphragm squeezes the abdominal organs, and pushes outward on the abdomen. In the low breathing, the lungs are given greater participation than in the methods already mentioned, and therefore, more air is inhaled. For this reason, many Western authors consider the low breathing, which they call abdominal breathing, as the most perfect method known. But the Eastern yogi has known for centuries a better method, and so have some Western authors. The defective point of all breathing methods, with the exception of the full breath, is that none of them fills the lungs completely with air. For even in the best of cases, in low breathing, only a part, albeit a considerable part, of the lung space is used. High breathing fills only the upper part of the lungs, medium breathing fills the upper part and a little of the middle part, low breathing fills the lower and middle part. It is evident that a method that completely fills the lung space will be of great value, because it will allow the one who uses it to inspire a greater amount of oxygen and store a large portion of prana. The complete breathing is, according to the Oriental sages, the best known way to breathe. Complete breathing. The complete yogi breathing brings together all the advantages of high, medium and low breathing, but without any of its drawbacks. It activates the entire respiratory system, every part of the lungs, and every respiratory muscle. The whole organism is activated with this method of breathing, and it is the way in which, with the least effort, the greatest benefit is obtained. In this method, each part of the mechanism performs its functions and its natural work. One of the most important features of this method is that the respiratory muscles come fully into play, while in other methods of breathing, only part of them are used. In the complete breathing, among other muscles, the intercostal muscles work actively, thus increasing the space in which the lungs can expand. In this way they offer sufficient support to the organs when they need it. In this method, nature uses the principle of the lever. Some muscles hold the lower ribs firmly in position, while others bend them outward. Thus, in this method, the diaphragm is perfectly utilized, and is able to perform its functions properly, and render the maximum service. In the movement of the ribs mentioned above, the lower ribs are governed by the diaphragm, which pushes them slightly downward, while the intercostal muscles impel them outward. The result of this combined action is the maximum possible enlargement of the thoracic cavity. In addition, the intercostal muscles lift and push out the upper ribs, which increases the capacity of the upper chest. If we study the special characteristics of the 4 breathing methods mentioned above, it is easy to notice that full breathing brings together all the benefits of the other 3 methods. In addition to the advantages resulting from the combined action of the upper and middle chest. In the next chapter, we will deal with the method of complete respiration. We will give instructions and expose the exercises required by this unique method of breathing. Chapter 8. How to come to practice the complete yogic breathing. Whoever wishes to know the arcana of the method of complete breathing should not be content to learn it only halfway, but should work hard until it becomes his natural method of breathing. This will require work, time and patience, because without it you will never get anything of importance, in breathing, or in any other area of life. The path leading to the mastery of the science of breathing is not an easy one, and the student must be prepared to work seriously. But it is good to remember that the results that are achieved are extraordinary, and absolutely reward the efforts made. We say this so that the importance and necessity of approaching this fundamental method of breathing seriously from the very beginning is well understood. We repeat again, if you start well, the results will be profitable, but if you neglect the foundations, the whole building collapses later. Perhaps the best way to begin the teaching of the practice of yogic full breathing is to affirm that there is nothing forced or abnormal about full breathing. On the contrary, it is a return to the principles of nature. Uncivilized men and children breathe in this way when they are healthy. It is good to note at the outset that complete respiration does not necessarily consist in filling the lungs completely with each inhalation. For by using the method of complete breathing, one can inhale the usual amount of air and distribute it to all parts of the lungs. But it should be practiced, a series of full breaths several times each day, and whenever the occasion arises, in order to keep the body well oxygenated. The following exercise, divided into 3 parts, will give us a first idea of what it is, and how complete breathing works. First, standing or sitting, in an upright position, relaxed and breathing through the nostrils, you inhale firmly, filling the lower part of the lungs first. This is achieved by using the diaphragm, which when descending, exerts a slight pressure on the abdominal organs, and pushes the front wall of the abdomen outward. Second, the middle region of the lungs is then filled, lifting the lower ribs, the sternum and the chest. Third, finally, the upper part of the lungs is filled by gently pulling up the chest with the upper ribs. The lower part of the abdomen will contract slightly, providing support, so that the upper part of the lungs are filled. It may seem that this movement consists of 3 different and markedly consecutive times. However, the inhalation should be continuous and the entire thoracic cavity, from the diaphragm to the apex of the chest, in the clavicular region, should be dilated with a uniform movement. No sudden inhalations should be made, and a regular and continuous action has to be achieved. Practice will soon master the tendency to divide the inhalation in 3 times, and will result in a continuous and uniform breathing. In a short time, it will be possible to complete the inhalation in a couple of seconds. 1. Hold the breath for a few seconds. 2. Slowly exhale, keeping the chest in a firm position, entering the abdomen a little, and raising it without haste, as the air is withdrawn from the lungs. Once the air is completely exhaled, relax the chest and abdomen. Once you have mastered this exercise, you will automatically execute the movement. It will be noticed that by this method of breathing, all the organs of the respiratory system come into action, and all parts of the lungs work, even the most secluded air cells. The thoracic cavity expands with firmness and elasticity, and the uniform, continuous, and complete breathing is achieved. It is a good idea to practice this in front of a full-length mirror, with your hand on your abdomen, so that you can observe the movements, as you will understand much better the mechanism of complete breathing. After the inhalation, it is convenient to raise several times the shoulders, which in turn raise the clavicles, and allow the air to pass freely to the small upper lobe of the right lung, where tuberculosis sometimes originates. At first it may be somewhat difficult to adopt the system of complete respiration, but the difficulties will be overcome with a little practice, and then you will never voluntarily return to the old methods. Chapter 9. Physiological effects of complete respiration. It is almost impossible to ponder sufficiently the advantages of this practice. The practice of complete respiration removes the possibility of contracting from serious pulmonary affections to bronchitis. The lack of oxygenation leaves us lethargic and vulnerable to germs, bacteria and viruses. Therefore, a good breathing guarantees us a better state of general health, and consequently, a lower probability of contracting any type of disease. Whoever practices this special breathing will get a broad and well-developed chest. Many flu-like states can be avoided, practicing daily a few breaths, as indicated. When one feels cold, it is enough to breathe concentrating for a few minutes, so that the body warms up. Almost all colds can be cured by complete respiration and partial abstinence from food for a day. The quality of the blood depends, in great part, of its level of oxygenation. And if the oxygenation is incomplete, the blood is impoverished, is loaded with all kinds of impurities, the whole system suffers from lack of nutrition, and is poisoned, because of waste products not eliminated. As the blood irrigates, oxygenates and nourishes the whole body, it is evident that an impure blood will produce a detrimental effect on the system. Digestion, too, depends largely on the oxygenation of the blood, for the food must absorb oxygen from the blood, before it can be digested and assimilated. It is easy then, that the digestion and assimilation are affected by a defective breathing. And when assimilation is not normal, the system becomes malnourished, appetite is lost, bodily vigor declines, strength diminishes, and man declines and feels weak. All due to defective respiration. Even the nervous system suffers with incomplete respiration, for the nerves become weak and insufficient to generate, store and transmit nerve currents, when the blood does not nourish them vigorously. Moreover, the same nerve currents, and the force emanating from them, diminish due to poor respiration. But the latter belongs to another aspect of the matter, which we shall deal with later. We will now concentrate on drawing the reader's attention to the nervous mechanism, which suffers when breathing is improper. The effect of the genital organs on the general state of health is sufficiently well known, for us to be obliged to treat it at length. Suffice it to say that if the genital organs are weakened, the whole system is weakened. The complete breathing produces a rhythm that obeys a plan of nature to preserve the genital organs in normal conditions. With good breathing, the reproductive functions are strengthened and vitalized by sympathetic and reflex action, toning and strengthening the entire physiological organism. But this does not mean that the lower sexual instincts must necessarily be awakened. On the contrary, the yogis have always advised continence and chastity, and have learned to control their passions. But mastery of sexuality does not mean sexual weakness, and yogic teachings say that a man or woman in control of the faculties of his or her sexuality will have more willpower to control himself or herself. Yogis know that sexual energy can be conserved and used by man in the development of his body and mind. We will see later an exercise, destined to conserve the sexual energy. But whether or not one wishes to adopt the yogic theories of continence and chastity, it will be seen that complete breathing will vitalize and normalize the sexuality of all who adopt it. The lustful will find that normality means a decrease rather than an increase of desire. While in the weakened will be alleviated depression, which until then would have experienced. To avoid misinterpretation of this aspect, we will say that the ideal of the yogi is to have a body robust and firm in all its parts, governed by a powerful will, animated by noble aspirations. In the practice of the system of breathing that we deal with here, the diaphragm contracts during inhalation, and gently squeezes the liver, stomach and other organs. And in combination with the rhythm of the lungs, it acts as a gentle massage to these organs, stimulating their activity and normal functioning. Each inhalation contributes to this internal exercise, and promotes normal circulation, in the organs of nutrition and elimination. In high and medium breathing, the organs do not get this beneficial internal message. The Western world gives much importance to physical culture, which is very convenient, but we must not forget that not everything is summarized in the exercise of the external muscles. The internal organs also need to be exercised, and nature's plan for this purpose is complete breathing. The diaphragm is the main instrument of this plan, for its rhythmic action vibrates the organs of nutrition and elimination. It stimulates them by massaging them, and each inhalation increases their blood supply, toning the organism in general. Any organ or part of the body that is not exercised slowly atrophies, ceases to function healthily, and diseases are contracted. Even without taking into account the millenary teachings of the East, from a purely physiological point of view, the method of complete breathing is essential for those who want to enjoy health and keep it. Many spend fortunes in search of it by complicated means and expensive treatments, but there is a simple solution available to everyone, the method of complete breathing. But few practice it. Truly, the stone that the builders reject is the cornerstone of the temple of health. Fragments of yogic teachings. We will now deal with 3 modes of breathing, widely used by the sages of the East. The first is purifying breathing, to which is attributed the great pulmonary resistance possessed by the yogis. Then we will see a vitalizing exercise of the nerves, transmitted for centuries, from generation to generation of yogis. We will end the chapter with the so-called vocal breathing, to which those who practice it owe their melodious, vibrant and beautiful voice. The purifying breath. To ventilate and cleanse the lungs, there is an exercise that for centuries, used by the sages of the East. Yogis often use this exercise to end any breathing exercise, and we advise you to do so. Purifying breathing cleanses and ventilates the lungs, stimulates the cells, and tones the respiratory organs. In addition, it contributes to maintain a good general state of health, and relaxes the whole system when it is tense. Speakers and singers, who by their profession use the voice a lot, should pay special attention to this method of breathing, as it could serve them, to maintain healthy and rested, your respiratory system. The purifying breathing consists of the following steps. 1. Inhale a full breath. 2. Hold the air for a few seconds. 3. Put the lips as if to whistle, taking care not to swell the cheeks, and exhale vigorously a little air through the lip opening. Then hold the remaining stored air for a moment, and release it in short exhalations, until there is no more air left in the body. It is important to remember that the air should be exhaled with enough force. This breathing is very restorative when one is fatigued, and a little practice will be enough for the unbeliever to be convinced of its effectiveness. As we have said, it is convenient to perform this test, at the end of any of the breathing exercises, so it is important to understand and practice it, until you can perform it easily and naturally. The vitalizing breathing of the nerves. This breathing exercise is one of the most powerful, stimulates and invigorates the nerves. It tones the nervous system and develops its strength, energy and vitality. This exercise stimulates important nerve centers, which in turn influence the rest of the system, and increase its energy, so that transmit more nerve flow, throughout the body. Vitalizing breathing consists of the following steps. Standing with the body upright. 1. Inhale a full breath and hold it. 2. Extend the arms forward, but not tense, only with the strength necessary to keep them in that position. 3. Then bring the hands slowly to the shoulders, slowly contracting the muscles and communicating strength to them, so that when the fists reach the shoulders, they are tightly closed. 4. Keeping the muscles rigid, then slowly return the fists to the previous position, and maintaining the state of tension, bring them back to the shoulders quickly. This movement should be repeated several times. 5. Exhale vigorously through the mouth. Each time you finish these steps, perform the purifying breath. The effectiveness of this exercise depends mainly on the speed of withdrawal of the fists, the tension of the muscles, the completeness of the inhalation, and the vigorous exhalation. It is necessary to practice this exercise several times to be able to appreciate it. It is an extraordinary invigorator. Vocal breathing. Many yogis are distinguished by their admirable voice, strong, soft, clear and powerful. This is largely due to their assiduous practice of this particular form of breathing exercise. Vocal breathing consists of the following steps. First, inhale a full breath, very slowly through the nostrils, for as long as possible. Second, hold the inhalation for a few seconds. Third, exhale the air vigorously through the mouth. Each time the exercise is performed, the lungs should be given rest by means of purifying breathing. It is important to note that experience teaches us that the timbre, quality, and power of the voice depends not only on the vocal organs of the throat and the organs of respiration, but also on the facial muscles. There are large-chested men whose voice is weak, while others with narrow chests emit tones of surprising strength and quality. Here is an interesting experiment. Placed in front of a mirror, with the lips in a whistling position, whistle, and in doing so, observe the shape of the mouth, and then the general expression of the face. Then, without changing the position of the lips or the face, sing a few notes, and you will appreciate how vibrant, sonorous and clear, is the tone of the voice. Chapter 11. 7 Yogic Exercises of Unwrapping. The following 7 exercises should be used to strengthen the lungs, muscles, ligaments, pulmonary alveoli, etc. They are very simple and wonderfully effective. All these exercises come from the ancient teachings of the ancient East. Breath holding. It is a very important exercise to strengthen and develop the respiratory and pulmonary muscles, and its frequent practice will make the chest widen. Yogis have observed that for the organs of respiration, nutrition, the nervous system, and even for the circulatory system and blood, it is very useful to occasionally hold the breath, after having filled the lungs with a full breath. For it has been proved that the occasional suspension of the breath favors the purification of the air that remained in the lungs, coming from the previous inhalations, and therefore, oxygenates the blood more completely. In addition, the breath thus retained collects all the waste. And when you then exhale vigorously, these wastes are expelled, and the lungs are cleansed, in the same way that an effective purgative can cleanse the intestines. Yogis recommend this exercise for disorders of the stomach, liver, and blood. They also maintain that it serves to cure bad breath, which often comes from poorly ventilated lungs. To practice it should be done as follows, standing upright and with the body erect. First, inhale a full breath. Second, Hold the air as long as possible, but without this retention is desperate. Third. Exhale vigorously through the mouth. After the exercise is done, the purifying breath should be practiced. At the beginning, you can only hold your breath for a short time, but with a little practice, it will become easier and longer lasting. The exercise can be practiced with a watch in sight, to appreciate the results obtained. The stimulation of the pulmonary cells. The purpose of this exercise is to stimulate the alveoli of the lungs. Beginners should practice it very gradually, because it can produce at the beginning a little dizziness. In the event that the beginner feels dizzy while practicing it, she should stop the exercise and walk slowly until the dizziness is overcome. In spite of the difficulties that beginners may feel, it is an exercise that can be easily mastered with a little practice. Stand upright, with your body upright and your hands on your sides. First. Inhale slowly and gradually. Second. While inhaling, gently tap the chest with your fingertips, running along its entire length. Third. When the lungs are full, hold your breath, and hit the chest with the palms of your hands. Once these steps have been completed, the purifying breath should be taken. This exercise stimulates and tones the whole organism, and is an ancient yogic practice. Many air cells in the lungs lose their activity due to bad breathing habits, and can even atrophy. Whoever has been breathing incompletely for several years, will not find it easy to bring the inactive air cells into activity immediately by complete breathing. But with a little practice, you will get them to activate their alveoli. It is an exercise which deserves to be studied and practiced. The dilation of the ribs. We have already explained that the ribs are fixed by cartilages, which allow a considerable dilation. In normal breathing, the ribs play a very important role, so it is advisable to exercise them occasionally, so that they retain their elasticity. The Western habit of standing or sitting incorrectly can undermine the elasticity of the ribs. This exercise is very good to combat this defect. Standing, and with the body upright. First. Place the hands on both sides of the body, under and as close to the armpits as possible, with the thumbs facing the back, the palms on the sides of the chest, and the fingers on the pectorals. Second. Inhale a full breath. Third. Hold your breath for a few seconds. Fourth. Then, gently compress the sides, and exhale at the same time. At the end of the exercise, the purifying breath should be taken. This exercise should be practiced moderately, especially by beginners. Expansion of the chest. Due to the inclination of the body, forward and downward, which forces most sedentary work, the chest tends to narrow and lose strength. This exercise is excellent to restore the natural conditions, and obtain a normal and healthy expansion of the chest. Standing, and with the body upright. First. Inhale a full breath. Second. Hold the air. Third. Extend your arms out in front of you, with closed fists, up to shoulder level. Fourth. Bring the fists vigorously outward, until they form a straight line with the shoulders, from one fist to the other. Fifth. Exhale vigorously through the mouth. After the exercise is done, the purifying breath should be practiced. The exercise in progress. This exercise is extremely complete, since it integrates the general toning of the muscles, with the benefits of complete breathing. First. Walk with a calm step, head high, chin slightly tucked in, and shoulders back. Second. Inhale a full breath, mentally counting to 8, one number per step, making the inhalation, lasting the time spent in taking 8 steps. Third. Then exhale slowly through the nostrils, counting again to 8, one number for each step. Fourth. Rest between breaths without stopping walking, counting to 8, one number per step. Fifth. Repeat until you feel tired. Then, rest for a few minutes, and then resume the exercise. Then, perform the purifying exhalation. Another equally effective version of this exercise is to perform it by holding your breath while counting 1, 2, 3, 4, one number per step, between the second and third indications. This exercise can be done several times a day. The morning exercise. This exercise is an extraordinary way to start the day, activating and relaxing the lower muscles and the respiratory system. Standing, with the body upright, head high, the view to the front, shoulders back, firm knees and hands on the sides. First, lift the body very slowly, on the tips of the toes, inhaling a full, slow and vigorous breath. Second, hold the breath for a few seconds, keeping the position. Third, slowly descend to the first position, exhaling slowly at the same time the air through the nostrils. Circulatory stimulation. This exercise is highly recommended to activate the circulation, as it leads the arterial blood to the extremities. And it makes the venous blood return to the heart and lungs, so that they receive the oxygen inhaled with the air, and the body is oxygenated, and obtains a healthy quota of prana. Standing, with the body erect. First, inhale a full breath and hold it. Second, gently lean forward, and grasp a stick with energy and firmness, gradually putting full force into squeezing it. Third, stop squeezing the stick, slowly return to the first position, and exhale slowly. Fourth, repeat several times. Finish the exercise with the purifying breath. This exercise can be done without actually using the cane, as it is enough to clench your fists tightly. People with circulatory problems should perform this exercise daily, accompanied by the purifying breath. The 6th and 7th exercises can be performed together, one after the other, every morning. Chapter 12. 7 other exercises. In this chapter, we will describe 7 other breathing exercises from the East, distinct and independent of each other, and with different purposes. Each one should determine which of these exercises is best suited to the needs of his particular case. Although they are called minor exercises, the name should not lead us to believe that they are unimportant, because, although they are less general than those already explained, they are exercises that can be very beneficial. To emphasize the importance of these exercises, we will say that in the East, it is not uncommon to find books dedicated exclusively to these 7 exercises. Exercise number 1. Standing, with hands on the sides of the body. First, inhale a full breath. Second, raise your arms very slowly, keeping them firm, until you bring your hands together above your head. Third, hold your breath for a few seconds. Fourth, lower your hands slowly to your sides, exhaling gently at the same time. At the end of the exercise, practice the purifying breath. Exercise number 2. Stand with your arms stretched out in front of you. First, inhale a full breath and hold it. Second, bring the arms horizontally backwards, as far as possible, then return slowly to the first position, and repeat these movements several times, holding the breath. Third, exhale vigorously through the mouth. At the end of the exercise, practice the purifying breath. Exercise number 3. Standing, with arms stretched out in front of you. First, inhale a full breath. Second, move slowly and circularly the arms backwards, a few times, and the same movement reversed as many others, holding the breath. You can vary this movement, alternating the rotation of the arms, like the blades of a windmill. Third, exhale vigorously through the mouth. At the end of the exercise, practice the purifying breath. Exercise number 4. Lying face down, with your hands on your sides, and palms resting with fingers slightly ajar, on the floor. First. Inhale a full breath, and hold it. Second. With the body rigid, rise with the support of the arms, until gravitating all the weight of the body, on the hands and the tips of the feet, as if walking on all fours. Third. Return to the first position. Repeat the movement several times. Fourth. Exhale vigorously through the mouth. At the end of the exercise, practice the purifying breath. Exercise number 5. Standing, with the palms of your hands resting on the wall, at shoulder height. 1. Inhale a full breath, and hold it. 2. Bring the chest close to the wall, resting the weight of the body on the palms of the hands. 3. Withdraw the body backwards with the strength of the arms, keeping the breath and the body straight. 4th. Exhale vigorously through the mouth. At the end of the exercise, practice the purifying breath. Exercise number 6. Stand with your hands on your hips, elbows outward. First. Inhale a full breath, and hold it. Second. Keep the legs and hips firm, and lean the chest forward, as if bowing, and at the same time exhale slowly. Third. Return to the first position, and take another full breath. Fourth. Bend backwards, as far as you can, exhaling slowly. Fifth. Return to the first position, taking a full breath. Sixth. Tilt the trunk to the right, exhaling slowly. Seventh. Return to the first position, making a full breath. Eighth. Tilt the trunk to the left, exhaling slowly. At the end of the exercise, practice the purifying breath. Exercise number 7. Standing or sitting, straighten the trunk. First. Do a complete breathing, but instead of doing it continuously, inhale in short, fast and frequent intermittent breaths, as if you were inhaling aromatic salts, or harmonic, and you do not want to absorb an excessive amount. Do not exhale these short inhalations, but accumulate them, until they completely fill the lung space. Second. Hold the inhalation for a few seconds. Third. Exhale through the nostrils, in a long and calm exhalation. At the end of the exercise, practice the purifying breath. Chapter 13. Vibration and Rhythmic Breathing. The fundamental of rhythmic breathing is the mental image of rhythm. Those who know something of music, will know the measure of the beats. Those who do not, can acquire the notion of rhythm by observing the march of a regiment. The yogis base the measure of their rhythmic time on the number of beats of their heart in a given time. The heartbeat is slightly different in different people, and the unit of the heartbeat of each person should be its rhythmic module in rhythmic breathing. To know the normal beat of one's own heart, it is enough to put the fingers on the pulse while relaxed, and count to 6 twice, until the rhythm is fixed in the mind. With a little practice, one will easily become aware of one's own heart rate. The beginner usually inhales for 6 beats, but with practice will be able to increase this number. The fundamental rule for rhythmic breathing is that the units of inhalation and exhalation should be equal to each other. While the retention units should be half the number used in the inhalation and exhalation. The exercise of rhythmic breathing, which we will describe below, must be completely mastered, as it forms the basis of many others, which we will describe later. Sitting, straight, in a comfortable posture, so that the chest, neck and head, are as close to the straight line as possible, with the shoulders back, and hands resting on the knees. First. Slowly inhale a full breath, counting 6 beats. Second. Hold the air in the lungs, counting 3 beats. Third. Exhale slowly through the nose, counting 6 beats. Fourth. Count 3 beats, before inhaling again. 5. Repeat the exercise several times. After the rhythmic breathing, practice the purifying breathing, which will rest and cleanse the lungs. With practice, you can increase the duration of inhalations and exhalations until 15 beats have elapsed. In this increase, it should be remembered that the retention time between breaths should be half the time for inhalation and exhalation. It is not necessary to strive to increase the duration of breathing, because the body should gradually get used to it. However, maximum attention should be paid to acquiring the rhythm, which is more important than the length of the breath. After a few weeks of practice, the body will feel like a perfectly tuned instrument. This exercise requires practice and perseverance, but the satisfaction that is experienced by the progress made makes it worth the effort. The yogi is the most patient and persevering man in the world, and his astonishing achievements stem largely from this condition. We can all work to acquire these virtues. Chapter 14. Phenomena of rhythmic breathing. Except for the instructions on rhythmic breathing, most of the exercises we have seen so far relate to the physical plane. But we must remember that their real purpose in the Eastern culture is to give a substantial basis to the psychic and spiritual planes. However, the two planes should not be completely divided, but we must remember that the healthy body is a prerequisite for a healthy mind. And also that the body is the temple of the principle of individuation, the lamp in which the light of the spirit burns. To neglect some of the planes is a mistake that must be rectified with all speed, because it always brings very negative consequences. We will now deal with the psychic aspect of the yogic science of breathing, by means of a series of exercises, with their corresponding explanation. Each exercise of rhythmic breathing is accompanied by the recommendation to direct the thought towards the goal being pursued. This mental attitude is key to the achievement of the goals set. It is not the object of this work to deepen the subject of the power of the will. But it is enough to warn us that for the Oriental world, the main obstacle to reach a goal are the obstacles of the own mind, and not the physical or contextual difficulties. 1. General instructions for psychic breathing. The basis of psychic breathing is rhythmic breathing. To avoid useless repetition, in the following pages, we will simply tell you how to breathe rhythmically. And we will add the instruction referring to the power of the will directed and operating, in tune with the vibrations of rhythmic breathing. Soon after practicing this exercise, it will be noticed that there is no need to count after the first rhythmic breathing. For the mind will have acquired the idea of time and rhythm, and you will be able to breathe in this way automatically. Then the mind will be clear for the projection of psychic vibrations under the direction of the will. 2. The distribution of prana. Lying down, lying on the floor or on a mat, with the muscles relaxed, resting the hands on the solar plexus, on the pit of the stomach, where the ribs begin to separate, breathe rhythmically. Then, concentrate on each inhalation, draw more prana, or vital energy from the universal reservoir, which is received in the nervous system, and stored in the solar plexus. On each inhalation, concentrate on the prana or vital energy, which is distributed throughout the body, and reaches the organs, muscles, nerves. The arteries, veins, cells and atoms, from head to toe, to invigorate and stimulate the nervous system, and the whole organism. To achieve concentration, in the acquisition and storage, try to form a mental image of the current of prana that enters the lungs, to be then received in the solar plexus. It is not necessary an enormous imaginative power, nor supernatural powers, it is enough the mental representation of what is wanted to obtain. The firmness in the representation of the mental image is much more effective than the violent desire that dissipates uselessly the energy. This exercise is especially beneficial when one feels depressed, without energy. 3. Relief of pain. Lying down or sitting upright, breathe rhythmically, representing the inhalation and storage of prana. After several breaths have been taken, and a good amount of prana has been stored in the solar plexus, send it to the painful part, to restore the circulation, and the power of the nerve current. Then inhale more prana to expel the painful condition, and as you exhale, hold the thought that the pain is drained away. One exhalation stimulates the painful part, and the next expels the pain. Do this for 7 breaths, then practice the purifying breath, and then take a moment of rest. It will not take long to experience a noticeable relief in the painful area. You will also notice that many aches and pains will subside before the 7 breaths are completed. By placing your hand on the sore spot, you can get faster results. If the exercise is practiced in this way, send the prana current along the arm to the diseased part. 4. The regime of circulation. Lying down or sitting upright, breathe rhythmically, and with the exhalations direct the circulation towards the part you wish to reactivate or revitalize. This breathing exercise is infallible in cases of cold feet and headache. In the first case, the blood sent to the feet warms them, and in the second, the brain is relieved of the excessive pressure it suffers. It is easy to feel the sensation of warmth in the legs, as the blood descends, which is useful in proving that the circulation may be, at least in part, controlled and directed by the will. 5. Self-healing. Lying down with relaxed muscles, breathe rhythmically, and concentrate on inhaling and storing large amount of prana. Then send it to the affected part, with the purpose of stimulating it. With the exhalations in the direction given, concentrate on undoing the ailment or disease. Use the hands in this exercise, passing them down the body, from the head to the diseased part. While running the hands down the body, always keep the mental image of the prana flowing along the arm, and through the fingertips penetrating the body, to the diseased part and curing it. In this book, we can only give general instructions, without going into details about the various diseases. However, with practice, this exercise, slightly modified to suit the conditions of the case, will produce extraordinary results. Another way to perform this exercise, is to place both hands on the affected part. And then breathe rhythmically, keeping the mental image, that prana is accumulated, in the organ and in the diseased part. A mental image, in which the disease is being dislodged, as if dirty water were being pumped out of a bucket, to be replaced by clear water. This method is highly effective, if the mental image of pumping is maintained with clarity, representing with the inhalation the lifting of the handle, and with the exhalation, the pumping. 6. Healing others. We shall give here clear and simple instructions, which may enable us to heal others. The essential principle to be borne in mind is that by rhythmic breathing and the generation of mental images, one can absorb a considerable amount of prana and transmit it to the organism of another, thus stimulating the weakened organs, to eliminate disease, and restore them to health. The ability to generate the mental image of the influx of prana circulating along the arms and through the fingertips until it reaches the patient's body must first be mastered to perfection. With the breathing rhythm perfectly established, the hands are placed on the patient's body, letting them rest lightly on the affected part. And following the procedure of pumping, described in the previous exercise, the patient is completely filled with prana, while the mental image is generated, to rid him of his ailment. At short, regular intervals, the hands should be raised and the fingers shaken, as if the disease were being thrown away. After performing the treatment, it is essential to carefully wash the hands, and practice purifying breathing several times, because without this precaution, the patient's disease could be acquired. It is best to place the hands on bare skin, but when this is not convenient or possible, they should be placed on clothing. At regular intervals, you can gently and softly tap the treated body, with the fingertips, slightly apart. In chronic cases, mental commands may be expressed by words, although such a procedure should be used exceptionally, and never by beginners. We set out here the general principles, which can be applied in 100 different ways. Provided the operator is clearly conscious, that it is not his power which effects the healing, but the universal power which is in him, he can vary and be creative in the application of these general principles. 7. Healing at a distance. The prana can be projected to absent persons who wish to receive it. This is the secret of distant healing, which has been much talked about in recent years in the Western world. The thought of the healer emits the prana, and projects it until it reaches the psychic organism of the patient. To perform a distant healing, one must forge a mental image of the patient, until one feels in contact with him. When the relationship is established, the absent person should be mentally told that prana will be sent to him, with the intention of relieving him of his pain and illness. Then the healer should imagine that the prana comes out of the mind, at each exhalation of the rhythmic breathing, and that it instantly projects itself through space, reaches the patient and cures him. It is not necessary to set a time for the treatment, although it is not counterproductive to do so. The receptive state of the patient, whether conscious or not, that the healing will take place at a distance, puts him in a position to receive the vibrations transmitted, at any time they are sent by the operator. The thought of the person who is going to heal, launches and tinges its prana, and this, traveling swiftly through space like lightning, will lodge in the psychic mechanism of the patient. It is invisible and like Marconi's waves, it passes through the obstacles that are imposed on it, and looks for the right person to receive it. To heal people at a distance, you must formulate a mental image of them, until you feel that you are in harmonious communication with them. This is a psychic process, subordinated to the magnetic power of the healer. One can realize when harmony has been established, for it is manifested by a sensation of closeness. We have described the above as clearly as possible. This faculty can be acquired with a little practice, and some achieve it on the first trial. When you have established harmonious communication, say mentally to the patient, "I send you a supply of vital force and power, which will invigorate and heal you." Then, imagine the prana as coming out of your mind, with each exhalation of the rhythmic breath, traveling instantaneously through space, reaching the patient and healing him. There is no need to set overtime for the treatment, although it can be done if desired. Since the patient is in a receptive state, and awaits the psychic force to be sent to him, he will receive the vibrations transmitted at any time that the operator sends them. If fixed schedules are established, the patient should be placed in an attitude of receptivity and abandonment. The above is the great principle, which supports the distance treatment of the Western world. One can, with a little practice, do these things as well as the most reputable magnetizers. Chapter 15. Some further phenomena of yogic psychic breathing. 1. Projection of thought. Thought may be projected, following the method already mentioned, distance healing, and the target or person to whom it is projected, will feel the effect of the thought thus transmitted. But it should always be remembered that no bad thought can ever harm another person with good thoughts. For good thoughts are always positive for bad thoughts, and bad thoughts are always negative for good thoughts. You can, however, excite the interest and attention of another person by sending him or her thought waves in this way, charging the prana with the message you wish to convey. If you desire the affection of the person, for whom you feel love and sympathy, you can effectively send him thoughts of this nature, as long as the motives that animate you are pure. However, you should never try to influence another to your detriment, or for impure or selfish motives. For such thoughts are rejected with double force against the sender, harming him without affecting in the least the innocent target. Psychic force is good when employed for good ends, but we must beware of black magic or improper and perverse uses of it. For to attempt to do so would be tantamount to playing with a dynamo, and whoever does so will surely be punished by the result of the act itself. However, no evil person can acquire psychic power to a high degree. A pure heart and mind are an invulnerable shield against misguided psychic powers. If we keep ourselves pure, nothing can harm us. 2. Formora. To isolate oneself from the harmful influence of evil and harmful people, one should breathe rhythmically a few times to accumulate prana. And then, by the method of the mental image, an ovoid aura of prana should be projected, which will protect us from the disturbing influences of others. 3. How to vitalize oneself. For a quick vitalization of the organism, the best thing to do is to place the feet close together with perfect naturalness, and close the fingers of both hands. This prevents any leakage of prana through the extremities. Breathe rhythmically a few times, and you will immediately feel the revitalization. 4. How to revitalize others. To revitalize someone, the revitalizer should sit face to face with the patient, with feet and hands in mutual contact. Then both should breathe rhythmically, the revitalizer forming the mental image of sending prana to the other's organism, while the patient forms the mental image of receiving it. Revitalizing another does not mean for the revitalizer any diminution in the quantity or quality of one's own prana. People of weak vitality or passive will should be careful with whom they perform this experiment. For the prana of a person of bad character will be tinged by that person's thoughts, and may have a temporary influence on the weaker person. However, he can easily prevent such an influence by closing the circuit in the manner described above, then breathing a little rhythmically, ending with the purifying breath. 5. To charge water with prana. Water may be charged by rhythmic breathing, holding a glass of water by the bottom in the left hand, and then gently shaking the fingers of the right hand over the water. As if droplets from the fingertips are being poured into the glass, while projecting the mental image of transmitting the prana into the water. Charged in this way, water is an excellent stimulant for weak or sick people. Particularly, if a thought of health accompanies the mental image of transferring prana. The warning given in the previous exercise extends to this one, even though the danger exists to a much lesser degree. 6. For the education of the mental and moral faculties. The mind may govern the body, with the direction of the will. But the mind itself, also, may receive education and cultivation, by the exercise of the will. The mental and moral qualities can be educated, if during the rhythmic breathing, the mental image of what is desired is maintained. Equanimity, self-control, increase of power, etc. All these can be educated in this way. And defects can be eliminated by cultivating the opposite. For the education and development of mental and moral qualities, the following general exercise is suitable. Lying down, or sitting upright, represent the qualities you wish to cultivate. Then you should breathe rhythmically, keeping firmly the mental image as much as you can, imagining concrete actions of the ideal established in your mind. In a short time, the gradual and natural growth towards the ideal will be observed. 7. To acquire physical qualities. Physical qualities may be acquired by the same method by which mental and moral qualities are acquired. Of course, a man of short stature will not succeed in increasing it very significantly, nor is it possible to regain an amputated limb or other similar miracles. But the expression of the face and the general physical characteristics can be greatly improved. Many of the changes, especially those related to facial expression, are actually due to mental or moral changes, for the expression of a wise person is not the same as that of a fool. Just as the posture of a person connected with the arcana of the universe is not the same as the posture of a fool, who does not know that he is part of a harmonious whole in balance. To strengthen any part of the body, the attention should be directed towards it and breathe rhythmically. Keeping the mental image that a greater amount of prana or nervous force is sent to that part, to increase its vitality. This method is applicable with the same effectiveness, to any part of the body that you want to strengthen. 8. To dominate and control the emotions. Negative emotions, such as fear, sorrow, hatred, etc., are under the control of the will, can be dominated and controlled from the will, and the connection with the overcoming vitality of the prana. This exercise can help us to connect with the prana, to overcome negative emotions. One should breathe rhythmically, concentrating the attention on the solar plexus. Then, the mental image should be forged, that the negative emotions vanish, when exhaling or breathing out. By repeating this exercise, ending with the purifying breath, calm will come immediately. Breathe rhythmically, concentrating the attention on the solar plexus, and transmitting the mental command of health, give the mental order with energy, at the moment you begin to exhale. Then form the mental image that the unpleasant emotions are expelled with the breath, when you exhale. Repeat this 7 times, ending with the purifying breath, and notice how much better you feel. The command should be given with fervor, for coldness will produce no effect. 9. Transmission of reproductive energy. Yogis possess a great deal of knowledge about the use and abuse of the reproductive principle in both sexes. Some points of this esoteric knowledge have been spread and used by Western writers who have dealt with the subject, thus doing much good. In this little book, we can do no more than touch briefly on the subject, omitting much and limiting ourselves slightly, to make a simple mention of the theory. We will give a practical breathing exercise, by which the student will be able to transmute the reproductive energy into vitality for the whole organism, instead of dissipating it or wasting it in lustful outbursts, whether inside or outside of his marital duties. Reproductive energy is creative energy, and can be utilized by the system, transmuting it into strength and vitality, thus serving a regenerative purpose, instead of degeneration. If the youth of the Western world understood these principles, they would save themselves much unhappiness and misery in the future, and would be stronger, morally and physically. This transmutation of the reproductive energy brings great vitality to those who put it into practice. They will be filled with a vital force that will radiate from them and manifest in them what has been called personal magnetism. The energy thus transmuted can be used for other purposes to great advantage. Nature has condensed one of its most powerful manifestations of prana into reproductive energy, since its purpose is to create. A capital sum of vital force is concentrated in a tiny area. The reproductive organs are the most powerful battery accumulated in animal life, and their force can be harnessed and utilized as much as expended in the ordinary functions of reproduction, or wasted in orgies. Most of our students know something about the theories of regeneration, and we do enough to state the above facts, without attempting to prove them. The yogic exercise to transmute the reproductive energy is very simple. It is coupled with rhythmic breathing, and can be easily performed. It can be practiced at any time, but is particularly recommended when the instinct is most intense. Circumstances in which the reproductive force manifests itself, and can be easily transmuted for regeneration purposes. The exercise is as follows: keep the mind fixed on the idea of energy, keeping it away from common sensual images or thoughts. If such thoughts come into your imagination, do not be discouraged, but regard them as manifestations of a force which you intend to use for the purpose of invigorating the body and mind. Lie down loosely or sit upright. Fix your mind on the idea of carrying the reproductive energy upward to the solar plexus, where it will be transmuted and accumulated as a refracting force of vital energy. Then breathe rhythmically, forming the mental image that with each inhalation, you bring up the reproductive energy. If the rhythm is perfectly established and the mental image is clear, you will notice the passage of the energy upward and you will feel its stimulating effect. If you desire an increase of mental force, you can bring it up to the brain, instead of up to the solar plexus, by giving the mental command, and having the mental image of its transmission to the brain. The man or woman who does creative work, mental or corporal, will be able to use this reproductive energy in his or her work. Practicing the previous exercise, making the energy ascend with the inhalation, and sending it where you want it, with the exhalation. In this last form of exercise, only the amount that is required in the work will pass, and the rest will be stored in the solar plexus. Naturally you will understand that it is not the reproductive fluids that are carried upwards and used, but the etheric pranic energy that animates them, that is, the soul of the reproductive organism. It is customary to have the head bent forward, naturally and effortlessly, during the exercise of transmutation. 10. To stimulate the brain. Yogis have found the following exercise very useful, which by stimulating the action of the brain, produces sharpness and clarity of thought and reasoning. Its effect is astonishing, to clarify the ideas and invigorate the nervous system. Those who devote themselves to mental work, will find it very useful, both for better work, and to provide a means of refreshing and clearing your mind, after a hard mental work. Sit in an upright posture, keeping the spinal column straight, with the gaze straight ahead, and the hands resting on the upper part of the legs. Breathe rhythmically, but instead of breathing through both nostrils, as in the previous exercises, press with the thumb of the left hand, the left side of the nose, and inhale through the right nostril. Withdraw the thumb, closing the right duct with the index finger of the same hand, and exhale through the left nostril. Then, without removing the finger from the right side, inhale through the left nostril, and returning the fingers to the first position, exhale through the right. Then, inhale through the right nostril and exhale through the left. Continue alternating the nostrils in this way, that is, when inhaling through one, exhale immediately through the other, and vice versa. Always keep the other nostril plugged, during the process. This technique represents one of the oldest forms of yogic breathing, and given its importance and value, it is essential to dedicate oneself to mastering it. For yogis, it is extremely amusing to know that this method is often presented in the Western world as the complete secret of yogic breathing. In the minds of many Western readers, yogic breathing is reduced to the image of a Hindu sitting upright, alternating the breath between the nostrils, just that and nothing more. We hope that this little explanation will open the eyes of the Western world to the vast horizons of yogic breathing, and that they will discover the numerous applications for which it can be used. 11. The Great Psychic Yogic Breathing. The yogis employ a preferred form of psychic breathing, which they practice from time to time, to which they have given a Sanskrit name, the general equivalent of which is that which serves as the epigraph to this book. Intentionally we have left it for the last, because it refers that the student is already practiced, in the rhythmic breathing information of mental images. No doubt by the time he reaches these lines, he will already have acquired the general principles of the great breath, which are synthesized in the ancient Hindu saying, "Blessed is the yogi who can breathe through his bones." This exercise will fill the prana, the whole system. And the student will come out of it, with each and every one of his bones, muscles, nerves, cells and organs and parts, full of energy and harmonized by the prana, and the rhythm of the breath. It is the most complete and general purifier of the organism, and whoever practices it carefully, will feel as if he has acquired a newly created body, from the crown of the head to the soles of the feet. We will let the exercise speak for itself. 1. Lie down in a comfortable, loose and relaxed posture of the body. 2. Breathe rhythmically, until the rhythm is perfectly established. 3. Then, inhaling and exhaling, form the mental image that the breath is impelled through the bones of the legs, and expelled through the same, then, through the bones of the arms. Then through the top of the skull, then through the stomach, then through the reproductive organs, then, as if it were traveling up and down and along the spinal column. And lastly, as if the breath were inhaled and exhaled, through all the pores of the skin, filling the whole body with prana and life. 4. Now breathe rhythmically, and send the current of prana to the 7 vital centers, in turn, as follows and employing the mental image, as in the previous exercises. A. To the forehead. B. To the back base of the head. C. To the base of the brain. D. To the solar plexus. E. To the sacral region, lower part of the spine. F. To the navel region. G. To the reproductive region. Finish, by rapidly passing the prana current here and there, from the head to the feet, several times. 5. Conclude with the purifying breath. Chapter 16. The Spiritual Breath. Eastern philosophy teaches us that man will develop his latent capacities as humanity progresses. And it also teaches us that each individual, by the timely effort of the will, can contribute to the development of his spiritual faculties, developing as an individual much sooner than in the ordinary process of evolution. That is to say, man can develop faculties of consciousness, which will not become the common property of mankind until after many centuries of gradual development under the law of evolution. And for the development of these spiritual faculties, rhythmic breathing plays an extremely important role. Breathing, in itself, has no mystical virtue, despite its astonishing results. But the rhythm produced by good breathing is such that it brings the whole organism, including the brain, into perfect harmony, and thus provides the most appropriate condition for the development of latent faculties. It is not the purpose of this book to penetrate very deeply into the philosophy of the East, with regard to spiritual development, for that would require several volumes. However, in this chapter we will give instructions for the unfoldment of two phases of spiritual consciousness, which are as follows. 1. The consciousness of the identity of the soul, and 2. The consciousness of the relation of the soul to the universal life. The two exercises we describe are simple, and consist in the generation of mental images, while rhythmic breathing is performed. One must advance slowly and patiently, trying to grow like the flower, from seed to rose. But beyond the slowness of our progress, we can be sure that when the time comes to take a leap forward, the way will open up for us. As the adage goes, when there is a disciple, the guru appears. 1. The self-awareness of the soul. The true self is not the body, nor the mind of man. The true self is the ego, the principle of individuation. The true self is independent of the body it inhabits, and does not depend on the mind. The true self is a drop of the divine ocean. It is eternal and indestructible. It cannot die, for it is the soul. Each one of us is his soul. The body abandons itself, but we are not the body, but what abandons the body. The following exercise is the simplest way to meditate on the nature of what we truly are. Reclining, without muscular tension, we breathe rhythmically and meditate on the true self, remembering that we are an entity independent of the body, although we inhabit it. Meditate on the fact that the body is an instrument, and as such, it is used only as long as it is convenient to be used. During meditation one should forget the existence of the body, so that, advanced in the practice of the exercise, there is no consciousness of the corporeal being. Once this point is reached, the notion of immortality will often arise, and the individual will begin to show signs of spiritual progress, which both he and those around him will notice. But it is not convenient to give oneself too much to the higher life, if it means to despise one's own body, because man is in the physical world to fulfill a mission, and for that he needs the body. And it would be a great mistake to waste the opportunity to acquire the necessary experiences for its perfection, or to lose respect for one's own body, which is the temple of the spirit. 2. The universal consciousness. The spirit of man is the higher manifestation of his soul, and is an apparently separate and distinct drop, but it is really in contact with the ocean of spirit, and with all the other drops. When a man develops his spiritual capacities, he becomes more and more conscious of his relationship with the universal spirit. The sages of the East achieved the state of universal consciousness by meditation coupled with rhythmic breathing. The reader has no need for now of instructions about this type of higher meditation. Firstly, because he must first learn and master to perfection all the techniques used in this book, and secondly, because they are not fixed and univocal exercises, but paths that each one must discover and walk alone. In any case, we will give below the elementary degrees of the exercises, for the development of the universal consciousness, and with perseverance, each one will try to find the paths to progress. The path is always open, for whoever wants to walk it. The body should be in a reclining position, and without muscular tension. Breathing should be done rhythmically, until it is done in an unconscious and natural way. Then meditate on the existence of individuality, as an atom in the sea of consciousness, which is the life that animates and sustains everything. One should meditate on the participation of the drop that is one's own life in the power, strength and wisdom of the ocean of life. The mental image should be forged, of a tide that at each exhalation and inspiration, is moved by forces far superior to itself. And one should try to participate in these forces, which are within all souls. These meditation exercises leave in those who practice them, a feeling of exaltation and spiritual bliss. They should always be practiced reverently, and never if there is little time or other concerns that prevent proper concentration. 3. General instructions for the practice of the higher exercises. The exercises described in this chapter make us look into the mysteries of life, and require a reverent mental attitude. The frivolous person, without a feeling of spirituality in reverence, should not flirt with these matters, because he will not get any benefit, and would be taking lightly things of a higher order. Something that is never beneficial. These exercises are for the few who are called to understand them. During meditation, one should stop feeling about the ideas presented in the exercise, until they become the manifestation of the real consciousness in intimacy. These are not exercises to be practiced too often, nor should we allow the bliss achieved by these exercises to make us hate or even despise daily life. For even in daily life, there is that which manifests itself in the higher practices of life. And everything is good, and everything has its assigned place. You will find the steps you need as you are ready to continue on the path of ascent. Go forward with your eyes on the east, where the sun rises with wisdom. Peace be with you all, and with all manifestations of the Real.
As you bid adieu, may the whispers of wisdom found within Breath Unveiled, the hidden science of breathing, linger with you, guiding each inhale and exhale towards a path of enlightenment. Until we meet again, may your breath be your steadfast companion on the journey of life.